Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to do a quick rehash or a quick introduction to a ball rig and the animation of that ball inside of Blender. It's a really cool way to get introduced into animation, so let's just get to it. The first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a ball. So I have a nice little container here, or collection, and I'm going to do a Shift A and add the mesh, which is going to be a UV sphere. I'm going to right click and shade this to be smooth, and then in the properties on the right here I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier, and then I'm going to go to the materials and add a new material, and we'll call this M_ball. So let's get a little fancy here and make this into a beach ball. We're going to go into the shader editor and we're going to go and pull off of the base color and choose a checker color texture. And you'll see that it kind of comes in not really how we want it, but we'll fix that. And we're going to change this to be more of a kind of teal color. And then we're going to change the roughness to be kind of really shiny. So we need to make this kind of work a little bit more like a beach ball, which would mean that it's got these long pieces that go upward. And in order to do that, we're going to change this to be a mapping node. And then out of the vector, we need to target the UV coordinates. So we're getting closer, but this really is not what we want either. And that's because on the Y, we need to change this to be 0. So now we have our up and down coloring. And then if we set this to be an even value, we now have a beach ball. So it's pretty easy. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the timeline because we're not going to be really using the shader editor anymore, and then I'm going to go into a side view. So let's name this to be sk_ball. I like to do this because it's going to be a skeletal mesh, and make sure that you also name the geometry this, so you've got both things. And then over in pressing the N key, I can go to the location, and on the Z I'm going to move this upward so then we're flush with the red ground plane right here. Okay, so that's basically the geometry, and then what we need to do is we need to start looking at how we can add bones or a skeleton. And in order to do that, we're going to add another object inside of the ball rig collection. I'm going to press Shift A and I'm going to select the armature. Now the armature is kind of hidden, and this is because down here inside of the properties we need to go down to the visibility or viewport display, and we're going to click in front, and this allows me to see the bone. Now the bone is still too small. We basically want it to be at the top of the arch of the ball. So in pressing tab, we can go into the bone and we can change either the length or the tail. It really doesn't matter. We can change it to be 2 meters, which then corresponds with the ball. Now this is great and all, but it's not really connected. In order to do that, what we need to do is select the ball, select the bone, press Command P, and then we can do with automatic weights. And what this does is now if we select the armature, we can see that the armature has nested the ball inside of it, which means that the ball moves around. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go in here and select just the bone, and we're going to go down to the object constraint, and we're going to choose the maintain volume. Now if we change the scale of the bone itself, you'll see that we get this squash and stretch animation type. And this is basically what we're trying to get. This is a little bit like the Pixar animations that you would see. And now we're ready to go in and kind of create the keyframe of the bouncing ball. So we need to change something as well inside of this, and that would be inside of the frame range. We basically want to make sure that our frame rate is 30. This is pretty standard for animation. And we need to change the frame end to be 31. So now we have all of our view right here. We can just do frame all. And what we want to do is look at how we are able to change the properties of the bone itself. So the bone that we have here, we know that we want to set the scale property. So right clicking, we can insert a single keyframe. We can go to the end here and we can also insert a single keyframe. Now, the next thing that we want to do is think about if a ball is leaving the ground and it's bouncing up and down, it's going to squash. So let's go ahead and have this to 0.5, and we'll set a single keyframe here. And then we will move to frame 13, and we will set it to be double because we're leaving the ground at this point. You can think of it that way. And then at frame 20, which is basically the apex, the top of the bounce, we're going to go back to frame full scale. So that kind of creates this look, and we need to see where exactly are we getting the ball to where it's not deformed. We can see in 10 it's deformed, 9 is looking good, and 8 is still deformed. So this is actually going to be where the location is changing for the bone. And then we know that this is going to be where the location is at the very end. So let's think about it. Human eye height is somewhere around 6 meters by average. So let's go ahead and make the location be 6 meters and insert a single keyframe there. And now we can see that we're creating this bouncing ball motion as it's going up. So boom, boom, boom. So you can also see right here that we need to come down to the bottom and come back to where we were. So let's go ahead and set that to 0 and insert the keyframe. So now you see, boom, boom. Okay, so it's a little rigid, and that's because inside of the graph editor, we need to kind of change the way that these keyframe animation or keyframes are behaving, and that is the interpolation type of the curve. So I'm going to go ahead and in the bottom here, I'm going to choose the graph editor, and we have all of these different things going on. You can see that we basically have 2 curves, and we only want to work on one at a time. So in order to kind of understand it better, let's do the location first. So in the location, we can see that it's curved here and it's going to the top, and we actually want a parabolic arc. And in order to achieve that, we need to select these 2 keyframes down here, right click, and in the handle type, choose free. And then I'm going to deselect the 2 outer sections, and then I'm going to do G and Y and move this up to create this arch that we would see bouncing up and down. So this is going to create a ball that's a little bit more bouncy. We're not kind of dragging behind. And let's do the same thing for the scale. We need to change a couple keyframes here. I'm pressing F to frame all. And the 2 things that we need to target are actually here and here. And we just want to shore these up so we remove these kind of bends inside of the keyframe. So like before, set it to free. Deselect with control. Move it in closer. Do the same thing here. Move it in closer. And now, if we come back, we have a bouncing ball. Now, a cool thing with this is, let's go back to the timeline because we don't have to change keyframes on this part. The ball itself is being controlled by the bone. Now, the mesh is actually completely independent. So if I select the ball here, and we think that the ball is going to move up on frame 9, well, maybe I want to actually keyframe the rotation. So I'm going to set the keyframe and the rotation there. We know at 20 it reaches the top. So we're going to set a keyframe here as well. And if we go back and play it, we can see that the ball now spins up and downward. So just like that, we've been able to kind of get this cool keyframe animation. We've rigged a ball, we've animated a ball, and done the basics of animation inside of Blender in a pretty short amount of time. So we'll probably follow this up with other videos where we can show movement down either a spline or even like constant movement with cycling. But this will wrap up the tutorial on a basic ball rig and animating and understanding the flow between creating the geometry, creating the armature, going in and keyframing in the timeline, and then like modifying those keyframes inside of the graph editor to create something that looks pretty pleasing, if you ask me. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and we'll look forward to you watching all the other Blender tutorials that we bring with scenery.